Why does the air quality in the city of Medellín just suck so much? It's one of the major downsides of living in this absolutely otherwise fantastic city, and I wouldn't say it ruins it, but it's definitely something that needs to be addressed, and actually already is being addressed, but in recent years it has actually got worse. So the main driver of that pollution effect, the bad air quality, are motor vehicles moving things around the city, and then the other bit is kind of stationary, so factories, houses, that kind of thing. And of that 79% of motor vehicles, the worst offenders are trucks, followed by dumper trucks, followed by motos, interestingly. In fourth place, buses, and the last being cars, taxis, that kind of thing. And so the main polluters are those big ass trucks you see here, which are usually from the 90s, they're usually from the early noughties, and you can actually see plumes of black smoke coming out of their exhaust when they're going along. It is pretty crazy, and it's something I didn't really pick up on when I was just visiting Medellín, when I was coming here on holiday. It's only something that kind of came onto my radar once I started living here for a while, because you'd actually just see it with your open eyes. I'm too young to have experienced that phenomenon in London in the 80s and 90s, where you could probably see pollutants just pumping out carbon dioxide into the air, but you can definitely see it on a day-to-day basis here. And interestingly, there was actually a study done in 2016 which linked 3,000 deaths in that year to poor air quality in Medellín, down to pollution, right? And we're 10 years on from them, and the problem has actually got worse. I mentioned in my previous video that in the last 20 years, motorbike usage in the city of Medellín and the metropolitan area has gone up almost 600% from 2004 to 2025, which is absolutely insane. And this kind of illustrates how bad the problem is. People are not taking public transport. People are using motos way more now, and here's why. So the first reason is just insane traffic congestion. As the city's grown, as Medellín becomes more popular, people need to still travel around, and people have been buying motos and using motos as their preferred method of going around the city. This is not only going to and from work, but it's also deliveries, it's also kind of logistics, things like that. Things like Rappi, if you want something delivered from a pharmacy, you can easily get that done, and then it all comes from a moto. So increased levels of traffic congestion in Medellín has just put people off public transport, and they've bought motos instead. Second reason why moto usage has gone up is just they're a lot cheaper than cars. They get taxed less than actual cars here in Colombia. They're a lot easier to run, they use less fuel, they're way cheaper to buy. You can buy motos for a fraction of the price of a car, and so people just see buying a moto as a way more affordable option to get around in Medellín. And to illustrate this, as you guys already know, when you choose the Uber Moto option instead of an Uber Ya, when you're here in Medellín, it can be like a quarter or a third of the price compared to taking a normal taxi, which just illustrates how much cheaper motos are. So people have been buying motos, people have been using them way more just because they're way cheaper than cars. And the third one is access to finance to buying these motos. So I just did a bit of research. Around 40 to 50% of motos are bought through finance. You can just get this really easily, often done at like supermarkets from Éxito. And so all the motos you get driven around, and half of them have been bought on finance. People have just taken out loans to buy them. And yeah, if you've ever been to Colombia, if you've ever been to Medellín, people love credit here. There's always like big queues outside the bank, inside the bank. People are always taking out loans. I think that's more of like an American thing in general, not necessarily just a Colombian thing. Financing on motos is super easy. You don't have to buy it outright. So if you are living in Medellín and you don't have a lot of money, you can easily just borrow 50% of the value of the moto, and then we have it, and then you can get around the city really easily. And the fourth one, motos are just so much quicker. I'll give you quick examples. So I was taking a flight back from Bogota when I was seeing my friend there, and from his flat in the north of the city to the airport in Bogota, it's around an hour's drive in a car, right? I left myself just over an hour to give myself enough time to go to the airport and everything, but I took a moto because I only had a rucksack. I didn't have a suitcase, I only had my rucksack, and so I hopped on the moto, and there was so much traffic in Bogota, but I was able to weave through it with the moto, and I got there in half an hour. And that example would be exactly the same in Medellín. It's just way faster going around on a moto. So if you're a local paisa and you have a job and you need to travel around, maybe you live in the north of the city, which a lot of people do, and you work in Envigado or you work in Poblado, and you need to do a commute to and from work every day, a moto is going to be way cheaper, way faster. You can probably finance half the vehicle if you really want, and so it's just a no-brainer option. This is why moto usage has gone up almost 600% in the last 20 years, which is wild. Look, I'm just in Santa Maria de los Angeles, one of my favorite little barrios here in El Poblado, just because I'm going to the gym here. The body tech here, by the way, is really sick. It has these Stairmasters and bikes which just have an amazing view of the city, and right now I can't see any motos, ironically, but up until this point, they have just been zipping around non-stop. And yeah, it's a real problem here, and they are one of the biggest pollutants and causes of bad air quality here in Medellín. So yeah, all the extra vehicles in the city contribute massively to the air quality problem. Also, the topography of the city, the fact that it's in a bowl, that pollution can't really escape, makes the air quality problem worse. And I've read that when the seasons change, so from kind of March and April, and also September, October, when it kind of goes from dry season to rainy season, this also can be when the air pollution gets even worse because the seasons change, something happens like that. I'm not an environmental expert, so I don't really know all the details. So yeah, the geography of where Medellín sits doesn't help the pollution. It means the bad air can't really escape. And when you go to and from the airport, basically when you leave the bowl of Medellín, when you leave the valley of Aruba, you can see the plume of pollution just sitting on top of the city. It actually looks like it's raining, and it's not, it's just pollution. And so yeah, the geography of Medellín doesn't help, but also just the general population growth of Medellín is a big contributor. So I think in a census of 2018, the metropolitan area had 3.7 million people living in it, and now it's 4.2 million. So an extra 500,000 people in 8 years now live in the city. And if you add that on top of tourists who are visiting and yada yada yada, this is another reason why there's been an increase in cars, an increase in motos, which just adds to the pollution. Then the pollution can't escape, and it means the bad air quality is getting worse. Interestingly, I think in the 2010s, the city of Medellín planted something like an extra 2 million trees to combat this problem, and it resulted in like the temperature of the city dropping by around 2 degrees, which is great. But I think since then, since the pandemic, since 2020, and maybe a little bit beforehand, the problem has kind of got a little bit worse as people use motos more as an effective mode of transport. And I've just got a really crazy stat to illustrate that. So in 10 years, from 2005 to 2015, the number of cars in the metropolitan area of the city grew from just under 500,000 to almost 1.4 million cars. That's almost 3 times the amount of cars in 10 years. Then couple that with more motos, more people, more economic activity, yada yada yada, and it's just basically a cocktail for insanely bad pollution. Don't get me wrong, Medellín doesn't have like one of the worst pollution levels in the world. It's nowhere near as bad as cities like in India or China or that kind of thing. And I think apparently the number of quote red days, which are really harmful for health, have dropped significantly. But me coming from London or like another European city, the pollution is really bad, and so they need to do something about it, and they actually already are. So I already mentioned the tree planting thing. They also have, as you guys know, the Piqui Placa, when you can't drive your car for 1 day of the week, or your moto as well. Does it apply for motos? I'm not entirely sure. But what I think the government need to do is they need to encourage people to purchase new cars, purchase electric cars, because while that already has improved, for example, you see way more Teslas now in Medellín. You see a lot of BYDs, which is great because they're electric. They don't really contribute as much to like petrol cars or diesel cars in terms of pollution. But I think the government need to go that one step further to encourage people to buy these new cars, these cleaner cars. I read another statistic, like most of the cars in Medellín and most of the vehicles would not pass like environmental tests if they were to run them on those vehicles. So yeah, that's definitely something that they need to improve. And they could start by the buses. They could just replace all of those disgusting buses from the 90s and early noughties, replace them with maybe just cleaner ones or maybe even electric ones, whatever. It would cost a lot of money, but it would probably be worth it in the long run. And it would go a long way to avoiding those deaths related to pollution. Because even some of my Paisa friends, they've said, look, I'm in Medellín for work. I like Medellín, the city and everything. But the moment I retire and I want more of a healthy lifestyle, I'm leaving the city. I want to go somewhere where there's better air quality, where there isn't as much pollution, all of that kind of stuff. So it's a really interesting one, honestly. So on the one hand, as the city develops, gets richer, develops economically, all of that stuff, as people get wealthy, they should be able to afford better cars, cleaner cars. But then on the other hand, as people get wealthier as well, instead of using the bus to get to work or using the metro, they're going to buy a car, they're going to buy a moto, they're going to use it more. In a Colombian way, they're going to drive 2 minutes down the road to show off their new car. So it's a little bit of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. And I really hope that in the future, things do get better in terms of the air quality. But I can totally see the air quality actually getting worse before it gets better. As a little bonus tip for improving the air quality, also the noise pollution in Medellín would get a lot better if they had maybe less motos or better motos or electric buses, things like that. Because basically the second worst thing about living here is the insane noise pollution, because all the motos, the buses, they're going up and down the hills, they're making insane amounts of noise everywhere, all of that stuff. That'll also get fixed a lot with improving the air quality. So I hope you found this useful, and I'll see you in the next one.